Libra, be careful on the last day of July 2026. You think you know what end-of-month fatigue is. Everyone gets a little more irritable, a little more tired and distracted, and the usual explanation comes readily. It was a tough month. But if you're a Libra, you need to stop for a second and consider an uncomfortable possibility. Maybe what you're feeling at the end of July has nothing to do with common tiredness. Maybe it's something else, something quite structural, something that has been silently forming for weeks, without anyone, not even you, realizing the true extent of what was accumulating. Imagine a dam. From the outside, it looks like just a smooth, solid, quiet wall. No one imagines the volume of water it holds on the other side. That's how Libra spends most of the month, a surface of calm, good humor, a willingness to solve everyone's problems, to listen, to yield, to say that everything is all right, when perhaps it wasn't. And each of these small sessions entered that dam like another liter of water that no one counted. The problem is that dams don't warn you when they're nearing their limit. They hold back until something small, almost irrelevant, becomes the exact point where the structure can't hold anymore. And if you carefully observe the last days of July in the life of a Libra, you'll notice a strangely consistent pattern. An irritation that arises out of nowhere, a tiredness that doesn't match the routine, a sudden desire to disappear from everything, from everyone, without any apparent reason to justify it. But there is a reason. It's just not on the surface. Think about everything Libra does in the space of a normal month. They postpone discomfort to avoid friction. They agree to a decision they didn't truly agree with, just to maintain peace. They listen to someone's venting and keep their own to themselves because it didn't seem like the right time to speak. They smile when their body wanted to do anything but smile. None of these moments in isolation seems serious. Each one in isolation is just a gesture of kindness, of emotional maturity, of someone who knows how to coexist. The problem is never the isolated gesture. The problem is that none of them evaporate. Every concession Libra makes to maintain balance around them enters a kind of internal reservoir that no one has installed a level gauge for. And reservoirs without gauges have predictable behavior. They seem stable until the exact moment they cease to be. Here's the part most people ignore. Libra wasn't taught to look inside their own dam. They were taught to take care of the visible wall, the part others see, to keep everything in order on the outside. And when someone is trained to monitor only the surface, it's natural that they completely lose track of how much is being held back inside. Not out of weakness, out of a lack of tools. Nobody gave Libra an emotional pressure gauge and said, use this every day, check the level, release it before it gets too high. And that's precisely why the end of the month weighs so much more than it should. Because the end of the month, especially one like July, carries a particular feeling of settling accounts, not just financial ones, but emotional ones. It's as if the calendar, unintentionally, pushes Libra to review everything that has been held back in recent weeks, all at once, without warning. And what emerges from this silent review is rarely calm. Sometimes it's a sudden urge to cancel all appointments. Sometimes it's an exhaustion that didn't exist the day before. Sometimes it's disproportionate irritation over something so small that it doesn't even seem like sufficient reason to explode completely. That's the exact moment when the floodgates crack first, not in the grand conflict, but in the tiny detail that should never have mattered so much. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose doesn't treat this accumulation as a personality flaw to be corrected, but as an internal engineering that Libra can learn to operate consciously. It presents real balance, not the kind manufactured for others to see, but the kind that is sustained from within, as a mental posture that is built day after day with small adjustments of release, and not with the silent accumulation that pushes everything to the end of the month. It's about stopping wasting energy, holding on to other people's harmony, and starting to take care of your own structure before it is tested beyond its limit. If you've gotten this far feeling that something inside you recognized this pattern, it's probably because it did. That discomfort that's still active now, that feeling of, this is it, this is exactly what I do. It's not a coincidence. It's the right time to face it head on while it's still clear, before routine stifles that clarity again. Last spots available. Link pinned in the first comment. Your clarity and genius are waiting. Don't put it off. Tell me in the comments, when was the last time you said everything's fine when everything wasn't fine? The curious thing is that nobody builds this dam on purpose. It forms little by little, almost unintentionally, made up of small decisions that seemed right at the time. An invitation you accepted out of politeness, an opinion you kept to yourself to avoid awkwardness, a discomfort you swallowed because it seemed too small to mention. None of these things in isolation is big enough to explain the weight you feel now. But dams aren't made of a single event, they're made of repetition. And there's a detail that changes everything. Each okay you say, without truly feeling it, doesn't disappear after the conversation ends. It stays. It adds to the previous one. It's like throwing a glass of water behind a wall every day, thinking that glass makes no difference, until without realizing it, you've already spilled a volume that no ordinary wall was built to hold. The question nobody asks is, how many glasses have you spilled this month without counting any of them? The problem isn't giving in occasionally. Giving in is part of any healthy relationship. The problem is giving in without ever demanding anything in return. It's maintaining the structure, always receiving, and never opening a valve, however small, to let out a little of what went in. And the strangest thing is that the more Libra avoids this relief, the more convinced it becomes that everything is under control, because the surface remains smooth, remains calm, continues to look fine. The most dangerous dam is never the one that visibly cracks. It's the one that maintains an impeccable wall until the day it simply doesn't anymore. Have you ever stopped to think about how long it's been since you truly let go of something, instead of just holding on a little longer? There's another detail that often goes unnoticed. Libra wasn't trained to monitor its own internal state. It was trained to monitor the surrounding atmosphere. From a very young age, it learned to sense when someone in the environment is uncomfortable, when something is about to turn into conflict, when it's time to soften the blow, to mediate, to adjust the tone. This social radar is extremely well tuned. The problem is that while it's always switched on externally, the internal meter simply doesn't exist, or it exists rusty, forgotten, without maintenance. That's why Libras are often the last to realize their own burnout. Everyone around them has already noticed some change, an unusual silence, tired eyes, a shorter temper, before they themselves can name what they're feeling. It's not a lack of self-awareness. It's that their attention has always been focused outward, taking care of others' well-being, and no one taught them where their own self-awareness meter is, or how to read it before it goes past the critical point without warning. What if the problem all this time wasn't a lack of strength to withstand more pressure, but a lack of a simple tool to know when to stop accumulating it? There's a scene that repeats itself in different forms in the life of almost every Libra. Someone asks, "Are you okay?" And the answer comes out automatically, almost before the question is finished. "I am, just a little tired." The phrase isn't exactly a lie, it's just that it never comes close to describing what's really going on inside. Because admitting the true extent of the tiredness seems, in some twisted way, a risk. As if saying, "Actually, I'm not okay, I'm holding too much in," would open a visible crack in the very wall that Libra has spent the entire month keeping smooth for others. And the most ironic thing is that this smooth wall was never built to deceive anyone on purpose. It stems from genuine care, a real desire not to burden those around you, not to turn every personal discomfort into someone else's problem. But there's a huge difference between caring for others and disappearing from oneself in that care. And it's precisely on this fine line that Libra's dam tends to grow without anyone noticing, including the very person building it brick by brick, good intention by good intention. And this is exactly where the end of July comes into the story, because the end of the month isn't a neutral time for those who carry this kind of internal structure. It functions almost like an automatic pressure test, imposed by the calendar without anyone asking permission. It's the moment when the mind naturally takes stock. What was resolved, what was left pending, what was swallowed and never mentioned again. And for Libra, this stock-taking is never just a to-do list. It's a complete emotional review of everything that has been repressed in recent weeks. Every dam, at some point, needs to undergo a pressure test. That's how engineers find out if the structure can withstand the volume it was designed to hold, or if there's a hidden weakness that only appears under real load. The end of the month does this emotionally to Libra, even without warning. Suddenly, everything that seemed manageable over the weeks starts to weigh on us all at once, as if the calendar were saying, now is the time to see what this structure can really handle. And here's the most unsettling detail of all. What if that structure had been cracked for months, and nobody, not even you, had noticed, because the wall continued to look flawless from the outside? If you've made it this far and felt a pang in your chest thinking about a structure that's been cracking for months without anyone noticing, this pressure test is probably happening to you right now, at the very end of this month. And recognizing this is the first real step, much more important than it seems. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose was designed precisely for this moment of recognition. It helps map where your own invisible cracks are, before the next end of a cycle transforms them into something bigger. It exists to give Libra the internal gauge that no one has given before. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. The answer, however uncomfortable it may be, is usually yes. And the cost of maintaining this impeccable facade is much higher than any external conflict that Libra avoids so much, because it's not easy to appear stable when inside everything is begging for a break. It's not easy to smile at an appointment, solve someone else's problem, mediate yet another argument that wasn't even yours, when your body has been signaling for days that it needs space that no one is giving it. This is the most silent exhaustion there is. Keeping everything beautiful on the outside while inside the walls are already under maximum strain. And perhaps that's why Libra fears its own explosion more than any external fight. Because a conflict with another person has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But the fear of one day losing control of one's composure, of finally letting out everything that has been swallowed, is a fear without a defined form, without an end date, that lives there, quietly, at the bottom of the reservoir, whenever the month begins to close. But this pent-up pressure doesn't usually come out all at once, as everyone imagines. It leaks out little by little in ways that no one recognizes as the same problem. A sudden irritation with someone who did nothing wrong, a desire to distance themselves from conversations that were once light-hearted, a tiredness that doesn't match the actual routine of that day. Small, almost invisible cracks that appear long before any visible rupture, but which are almost always interpreted as passing bad moods and not as what they really are. What if these small leaks, this sudden distancing, this irritation for no apparent reason, were actually cries for help that no one, not even you, is listening to? Notice how this often manifests itself in almost comical ways, if it weren't so revealing. A harmless comment from a loved one that on an ordinary day would go unnoticed, but which at the end of the month takes on a disproportionate, almost offensive weight. a sudden urge to cancel a meeting that you yourself had enthusiastically scheduled the previous week. A longer than usual silence in message replies without any clear explanation, even to yourself. None of these reactions in isolation seem serious. Together, they form a pattern that always points to the same place. The structure is asking for a pause, and the only available language it has found to ask for this is through small, short circuits in behavior. The problem with interpreting these signs as simple mood swings is that they keep repeating themselves month after month, always at the same point in the cycle, without anyone connecting the dots. And while no one connects them, the dam remains exactly as it was, without real relief, just waiting for the next month's end to repeat the same invisible script again. Those small cracks you've just recognized in yourself don't have to turn into a bigger rupture. They are, in fact, an invitation to learn the language of your own internal pressure before it needs to scream louder to be heard. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose works precisely on this point, deciphering Libra's small emotional leaks and transforming them into useful signals, instead of letting them accumulate until they become a crisis that no one saw coming. It's a practical tool for those who are tired of only discovering the problem after it has already exploded. Last spots available. Link pinned in the first comment. Your clarity and genius are waiting. Don't put it off. Perhaps it's time to completely change the question. Instead of asking, why do I feel so much? Perhaps the right question is, why didn't anyone teach me what to do with everything I feel? Because feeling intensely, absorbing the imbalance around us, carrying the weight of maintaining collective harmony, none of this is a character flaw. It's a coherent, albeit incomplete, emotional engineering. Every well-designed dam exists without a floodgate. This isn't a design flaw, it's an essential part of it. A dam without a floodgate isn't safer, it's simply a tragedy waiting for the right date to strike. What if, instead of learning to hold back even more, Libra could learn to open that floodgate of its own accord, in small doses, in its own time, instead of waiting for the structure to be forced to collapse at the worst possible moment? This is the real turning point. It's not about stopping feeling so much, nor about becoming tougher, more indifferent, more closed off from the world around you. It's about finally installing the meter that was always missing. It's about learning to release small amounts of pressure every week, every time an "it's okay" is said without being felt, instead of letting everything accumulate until the end of the month decides, alone, when the floodgates will open. This completely changes Libra's relationship with the calendar itself. The end of the month ceases to be that dreaded, almost inevitable moment of heavy emotional reflection and becomes just another checkpoint, calm and predictable, of a structure that has been gradually nurtured week after week. There is no longer that silent accumulation waiting for the worst moment to manifest itself, because the floodgates have already been opened several times along the way, in small doses, at the right time, without drama, without crisis, without surprise. Installing this meter doesn't have to be complicated, and you don't have to wait until the end of the month to start. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose was created as a practical guide for Libras to learn, simply and daily, how to open their own floodgates before the pressure decides to open them on its own at the worst possible moment. It's about transforming Libra's natural beauty for balance into something truly sustainable, and not just a facade that's expensive on the inside. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. There is something profoundly beautiful in Libra's nature that is almost never said so bluntly. The ability to bear so much weight from so many people for so long and still continue to offer the world a gentle surface. This is not weakness disguised as strength. It is real strength, only poorly managed, like a powerful dam that never received the engineering care it deserved. The end of July, with all the weight it carries, is not an enemy. It is merely the calendar reminding us, in its silent way, that every structure that sustains so much deserves, from time to time, to be reviewed, listened to, relieved. Libra doesn't need to stop feeling intensely to find peace. It only needs to learn to open, little by little, at its own pace, the floodgate that has always existed within, waiting for permission.